Good morning.
Good morning.
Is this firing up? There we go. Great. So before I get started, I started a hobby about 6 years ago, and a breakfast club with about a dozen chief information security officers in the New York tri-state area. I think I was holding court at a cocktail hour, and I had everyone laughing probably about my midlife crisis band that I play around the Jersey Shore. And I said, well, you're my best friends once a year when I'm at this conference, and why don't we get together at breakfast every so often? Well, 6 years later, there's 18 of these chapters. It's a grassroots club. Tom Scott is one of the co-champions of the South Carolina chapter. So it's called Secret. If anyone's interested in participating on these roundtables, they're non-sales, they're no cost, and we just get together in 2 to 3 month intervals for before business hours. Now, since the pandemic, we get together from 7:45 a.m. and we conclude by 9:30. So the club is called Secret, SEC for Security, RT for Roundtable.us. And happy to have all you folks. It's just a grassroots system, as if we were all at a breakfast diner and everyone's welcome. I try to screen everyone to make sure we don't have any Zoom bombers. I don't want anyone taking their clothes off or anything on any of those. So, but other than that, you're all welcome. So just reach out to me, go to the website. So we've all been experiencing some of the challenges in the supply chain, certainly. And it was all about logistics for there. Logistics in bringing the ships in, logistics of moving the stuff around. There was also a lot of the data. I'm going to come down a little bit. So a lot of the data that we have is really unusable. It's unusable. The data is what differentiates you and your organizations and what you do for a living in every aspect, in terms of the resource requirements that you have, in terms of the inventories that you have. We're all impacted by data, and data is really your intellectual property. It's what distinguishes you from your competitors. You know how much to bid for a project or to propose to estimate based on how good you could manage your data. So it's crucial to all of us. In the old days, around 1960, you could probably buy some items in your supermarkets without knowing anything about what was inside of that stuff. The date on it, on the expiration date, the ingredients and all. Around 1984, we started actually including the calories, the nutrition aspects. Just since 1984. We were very trusting. We didn't know what was in anything that we were buying, and we just kind of assumed everything. Well, we could see that there's not a lot of trust out there. There's bias. We've already determined that there's bias. There were errors in even building the corpuses of some of the AI machines, the algorithms. Remember, I talked about the intellectual property. The data is what distinguishes you from others. So if you have an AI environment that's constantly learning, and that public corpus, are you concerned that maybe some of your intellectual property is being fed into the public corpus, and that maybe your competitors are gaining some of that insight that you have as well? So that's why the best technique is to have the public corpus and a private corpus that's learning. So that way you can keep that private corpus and you can make a hypothesis based on that private and public corpus of information that's out there. But we're not accepting just the hypothesis now from the AI results. We want to understand how it arrived at the decisions that it's telling us to do. So we want that trustworthiness now. There's 120 billion user hours a year on low, tedious work that can be automated today, still today. 90% of the data is inaccessible, untrusted, or analyzed today. The trustworthy AI pillars are on transparency, the ability to explain how it arrived at that information, the fair and impartial, unbiased, or the bias mitigated. Quick, we saw that Rubik Cube. Did you see that? Just on the one before, how fast it unspun that. And again, based on the private corpus as well. There's a study that's been produced for the last 17 years by Ponemon Institute, Cost of a Data Breach. IBM is one of the sponsors of that report, and there's no cost to that report. It's open to everyone in the public at ibm.com/security. You could download that report. I'm going to hit a couple of things on that, though. So they interview about 17 countries, and 550 breaches studied, and 3,600 interviews. So the average international breach was $4.3 million per incident. That doesn't include ransom pay as well. In the United States, we're a larger target. We average about $10 million per incident. Some fascinating stuff. You know, I love statistics, and the remote workforces since the COVID era, not the organizations that were fundamentally structured with remote workforces, but the ones that accelerated that remote workforce, that constituted to $1 million extra per incident on those remote workforces. There's been a 41% increase in ransomware breaches since 2022. The Zero Trust reduced the incidents down to about $1 million. If you're not familiar with what a Zero Trust concept is, folks that have been around for a long time, like myself, I call it participant wards that I've collected starting my career around 1978. So the old days, we had these virtual private networks. You still have them today too as well, but there was a different thought around the virtual private networks. You had to jump in a lot of hoops, through a lot of hoops, to get that virtual private network set up on your devices. Sometimes you had to bring it to the IT department to load that, or sometimes they gave you tedious instructions to get that virtual private network established on your laptop or your home computer or whatever you used to get inside of your own network. Because you jumped through all of those hoops, there was a thought that, well, we can trust that person because we set that machine up. And it's locked down and so forth. Well, a zero trust premise, for some of you folks that may be not aware of the level set, is the thought that the bad actors are already inside the network. So gaining access to that private network doesn't matter anymore, doesn't hold any salt, because the bad guys are inside already. So we used to call it least privilege, because that was a nice approach, because if you only gave somebody the least amount of access that they required, then you reduced a lot of risk. Zero Trust takes that and brings it to the next level, again, bringing the thought that the inside threat might also be there as well. It might have a bad actor that actually might be employed by our organizations. So this all kind of weaves in. The XDR, we're going to talk a little bit about XDR. That's the extended detection and response. And that constituted to $3 million reduction per incident for the folks that were more sophisticated around security, using AI, using machine learning techniques. Cloud breaches, we used to have a funny thought. We used to say security by obscurity, and we would laugh about it, that there was no such thing. You know, you can't really hide, you know, your way out of situations. But here we're seeing $1 million less for the hybrid cloud environments. So we might actually be seeing some results from security by obscurity. Think about your own organization. You have your data scattered all over the place in your enterprises, different cloud service providers. You have some stuff on-prem, and a bad actor comes in. You're having a heck of a time even trying to find your own data when it's scattered all over the heck. Now you think about the bad actors that might have, you know, infiltrated your environment, looking for that bad. They're having the same situation as you are having, that your stuff is all over the place. So maybe that, in my mind, maybe that attributed to the $1 million less on the breaches for that. It takes about 277 days on an average to discover a situation and remediate it. The organizations that can reduce that down to 200 days or less, not a long time, 277 down to 200 or less, reduced themselves by $266 million. Or, I'm sorry, $1 million less on that. 266 on the cost savings for incident response systems. Your data, your privacy data, your healthcare records, by the way, are on sale probably right now for $180. What can we start doing better? We need to do a better job on detecting, enriching the information that we have, investigating and then orchestrating our response. All of that tied together. Another Ponemon Institute report that was out actually talked about 70% of the organizations that they interviewed had more than 40 different security controls in their organizations. Every one of them felt they didn't have the right number, and they needed more. So these siloed situations that we've been working on is just not working. Defense in Depth strategy came out in 1984, and that was the concept of a layered defense, almost like the castle and the moat, and you know, and maybe some of the soldiers that are inside of the castle. So the premise was that if somebody infiltrated one of your layers, hopefully another layer might stop them. Well, we're seeing, you know, all of these breaches on a daily basis and all. So Defense in Depth is just not doing the job totally for us. We need to have security controls that are starting to work in tandem together. The old days, some of the bigger organizations out there, ourselves included, would have a big portfolio, and they would try to get clients to opt into their entire stack. And the premise of that was that, well, if they, you know, bought things that were all inside of that portfolio, that at a minimum, maybe the solutions didn't break when they were kind of cobbled together. Maybe they didn't provide value to one another, but maybe they just actually just still survived and worked. Later on, these bigger organizations finally discovered that not everybody's buying the full portfolio. So we have to start moving to bring your own security and providing value to bring your own security. That's where we're going nowadays. And it has to go that way, because no one can survive with all of those more than 40 different siloed security controls that don't work in tandem to one another. There's a great documentary out there. I watched it during one of the snowstorms in the Northeast, and it was a kind of fun morning watching these. If you have a little free time and you might want to take a look, it's the wind-up to when Watson, AI, we like to call it augmented intelligence, by the way, instead of artificial intelligence, because it's providing value to people. The documentary is really amusing. In the beginning, they have all of the engineers. In the beginning, Alex Trebek wasn't even in the room, but they're making fun of all of the mistakes that the first generation of Watson AI was, just going on way off tangents. And, you could see everyone, even the producers of Jeopardy, because they were evaluating whether they were going to go or no go eventually. And the first one, it was really humiliating. It's great. It's all in this documentary. And they had someone keying in the questions very quickly when they were asking the Jeopardy questions. Well, then they come back another day, and this is when voice recognition was incorporated into AI. And when they did that, then it was a game changer. And you could see the faces, when these folks were, humiliating the engineers in the room, and now you could see the game changed totally in that. So it's a great documentary to see, and where actually the machine learning and the AI was actually interpreting other answers that the fellow contestants were answering, and then would learn from their answers right on the fly. Game changer immediately, and then subsequently beat the champions. So some of the uses of AI now and the value of it is in user behavioral anomaly detection and network behavioral anomaly detection. Let's talk a little bit about what those differences are. So user behavioral anomaly detection is generally information that I'm gathering, I'm aggregating from my different systems that I attach to. So I'm aggregating logs, I'm intercepting maybe some of the data from some of the systems and applications, but these are my systems that I'm attaching to. So it's the world according to me, because I could come up with the rules and policies on when there's an anomaly based on that. I might even have some automation in there to try to help me on that anomaly detection, and that's favorable to have that insight as well. But at the end of the day, it's still world according to me. What you also have is sophisticated administrators that have access and the keys to the kingdom to all of those systems that you aggregate from. So they can do a good job of covering their tracks. They can turn off logging in what you're aggregating before they do their bad deeds. The bad actors, even internally or externally, can do the same thing. In fact, think about the old virus days. The first thing that those viruses that you had on your early computers was to disable the antivirus. So they were covering their tracks. Network behavioral anomaly detection can't really cover the tracks because it's really what's coming through the pipe. And we could really view the insight now of that network transmission. We can see the payloads right on those. So, and nobody can intercept that. No one can get in there, turn the logging off or anything. The network is the network. It's the transport that's going. So when you tie that together with user behavioral anomaly detection now, you can even see where an administrator might have even shut something down. So that's the value of that. Step-up authentication and auto disablement and containment. So the old days, because I've been around for a long time, I remember American Express, the old days. They were probably the first organization that I remember calling in to get a balance from my telephone, and it would say, hey, I recognize that you're calling from your home phone, and we're not going to make you jump through a million hoops to tell you who you are, because we trust some aspect of that based on what we're seeing. So nowadays, well, that's baked into pretty much everything. I mean, we could see even anomaly detection on whether or not you're coming in from, maybe you live in South Carolina, and then maybe 2 hours later, you're logging in from New Jersey. Well, okay, that's doable. Maybe we might increase the risk scoring a little bit based on that, maybe that's something that is possible, but, let's heighten the risk a little bit on that. But maybe now you're coming in, 3 hours later in California. That might increase that risk score a little higher. Maybe you're coming in from Nigeria. Well, then that risk score might even go higher, and you're coming in, 1 hour difference from when you authenticated previously. So that's the anomaly kind of detection, and they can invoke additional authentication, maybe more multi-factor authentication, or let's prompt them a little bit more to authenticate who they are. Let's talk about automatic disablement. So the problem with all of those different security controls that we were talking about that may not be working in tandem to one another, what does it take to isolate that machine? Do you have to call someone? Somebody detects, hey, there's a ransomware attack on this particular device. Let's take this thing out of service. How do we do that? Can you do that in minutes? Can you do that in seconds? Can you do that in milliseconds? If you could do that in milliseconds, there's a chance that maybe you could stop some of the services that are going on that's corrupting all of the data and halt it right in its place. Maybe you could salvage 75% of the data before it's been totally trashed. That's the value of auto-disablement. The security incident event management systems, any one of them that is worth their weight, will, again, aggregate information from the systems that it knows that you've defined it to collect data from and aggregate and normalize from. And it would, I would hope, show you patient 0 and something that patient 0 is communicating to. When you start bringing AI into that, again, world according to what you have access to. That's all it can give you. When you bring AI into it, well, now it's looking at what you've aggregated, and it can look at public information as well and aggregate that all together. It could even go deep into the bad actors and maybe even get other payloads that they've been responsible for, other things that they've launched. More insight. And think how valuable this is, this AI perspective, for root cause analysis when you start looking at that. Certainly after you get out of your crisis, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the heck happened, how'd those folks get in, how do we prevent that from ever happening again. We also have the folks that are triaging the situation. They're being bombarded with events that are coming their way. And when those events are coming their way, they have to determine, is it real? Is it not real? Is it something I can handle? Or is it beyond my skill set? Is anyone else experiencing similar situations to what I'm experiencing? If it is real, is there remediation information out there and how I can fix this? Think about any crisis that you've been in. You've asked yourself those same questions. It took me a long time just to even phrase those questions, let alone trying to figure that out. Well, AI can tell you, yes, it is real. Here's the remediation information. Here's the bad actors responsible for it. And here's what it can do to you. Threat hunting is the new frontier as well. So these are the folks now looking outside of the perimeter on what's brewing. We need to start bringing in who's building up against us. Military, security intelligence are doing that. This is the answer. XDR. This is the next frontier. This is where you can bring your own security in, and you can bring all of these different tools and bring some commonality in there and start looking. That's it for me. I'll be around for most of the day. Please reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about the Security Club too. Then happy to do that. Thank you.